I had always thought of myself as disciplined to the bone. Every morning coffee had its time, every schedule its place, every word its exact weight. I knew who I was, an aide to a congressman, dreaming of ecological reform and convinced I was fighting against giants of the oil empire. And that was exactly why fate decided to joke with me. My first true opponent turned out to be the man who made my heart stumble. That morning I saw him in the hearing room. Tom Bancroft, a surname that sounded like the password to everything I feared and wanted to free the world from. The son of an oil tycoon. A man who, it seemed, belonged among predators, not reformers. Yet he sat across from me, placed his hands calmly on the table, and looked at me as though he wanted to understand, not defeat. I tried not to look back. But my eyes betrayed me. He smiled, not the cold, rehearsed smile I'd seen on politicians countless times, but quiet, slightly ironic, as if we already knew each other. And that smile made me lose my rhythm. He took notes in a thick notebook, bent his head, occasionally glanced in my direction. And I caught myself searching for his gaze, even though I knew this was wrong. That day we didn't say a single word to each other. But I already felt that someone had entered my life who would force me to doubt the rules I had written for myself. He was my opposite, and that made him dangerously irresistible. Spring in Washington didn't begin with cherry blossoms. For me, it began with him. With Tom. In the days after the hearing, I kept trying to convince myself that his look had meant nothing. Just ritual, formality, polite interest. But when we crossed paths again in the corridor, he didn't just walk past. Tom nodded and, to my surprise, smiled as if we already shared a secret. I returned the gesture politely and meant to continue, but he stopped long enough to hand me the folder that had slipped from my arms. "Looks like reform weighs more than it seems," he said, his tone carrying that light irony you can't fake. I froze for a moment, then laughed inside. There was a game here, and we both knew it. The following days we exchanged short phrases, in the elevator, over coffee, preparing for briefings. Nothing personal, yet each sentence had a hidden smile tucked inside. I caught myself waiting for these accidents, like children wait for recess. But with each spark of lightness, the tension grew heavier. The more I noticed his attentiveness, the harder it became to remind myself who he was. The son of an oil magnate. A man whose very name symbolized everything I fought against in my dreams. I wrote memos about green energy, but thought of his dark hair falling across his forehead when he leaned over his notebook. It was dangerous. And yet, it felt inevitable. My discipline shattered the moment I saw him in the lobby with the press secretary from the corporation. Her gesture was quick, familiar. She straightened his tie and smiled like she did it every morning. Jealousy surged hot and childish inside me, leaving me ashamed. It was ridiculous, he owed me nothing. We weren't even friends. But my heart had already chosen, whether my head approved or not. I tried to bury the sting beneath numbers, but the image of her hand on his chest looped in my mind all day. I hated myself for caring. Only later did I discover the truth. The internal briefing email arrived that evening, signed by her. She was coordinating the field hearing. Her gesture was habit, not intimacy. My heart slowed its pace, though embarrassment lingered. I had let shadows write the story. Then came the surprise. The next morning an email waited in my inbox. "Thank you for the clarity. Your data shifted the debate." It was signed simply, Tom. No flattery, no exaggeration. Just gratitude. It was a short note, but enough to steady me. Enough to tell me he saw me, not just the politics. The field hearing became our first real test together. The road stretched through farmland, and each stop was measured not in miles but in the honesty of the people we met. I watched how he handled tension in the rooms, not by wielding authority, but with facts, not by brushing off painful stories, but by asking for more detail. For the first time, I saw him not as the son of an oil magnate, but as a man who truly wanted to understand. One moment stayed with me. When a local official dismissed my calculations, Tom quietly stood, took a marker, and wrote out the compensation formula himself, citing my memo. I didn't speak, but inside me a wave of gratitude swelled. He hadn't just listened. He had stood beside me. There were comic moments, too. When the town hall's kettle began whistling mid-broadcast, I held the microphone while he wrestled the camera cord. We looked like a pair of clumsy magicians, and the room burst into laughter. It dissolved tension better than any speech could. That evening, standing near an old grain elevator with the wind roaring through the steel, I felt something shift. Beyond professional respect, something gentler had begun to grow. A quiet trust. Back in the city, whispers followed us. A photo from the field hearing appeared in the press, a warm connection between the reformer's aide and the oil heir. In the picture we were holding the broadcast cable, but the angle made it look like our hands were entwined. I clenched my jaw. The world would invent a story even before ours had truly begun. I braced for attack. But Tom's team responded differently. They released a plain report of the hearing's outcomes, farmers at the center, not us. No rebuttals, no gossip, just facts. It was his way of saying, I won't let them turn our work into scandal. That act meant more to me than any public declaration of affection could. I realized then he was sharing the risk, not running from it. In that solidarity, something deeper than partnership was forming. That evening, sitting at home with my coffee, I thought, perhaps this is how love begins. Not with grand words or chance touches, but with trust and respect. After the scandalous photo, we began to see each other differently. No longer as random colleagues across the aisle, but as people bound by a shared risk. In the corridors he started greeting me not with the formal nod, but with a pause, the kind that says, I was waiting for this. One morning we reached for the coffee maker at the same time. I looked up and our fingers brushed. Do you always drink it black? He asked. And do you always ask the obvious? I replied, hiding a smile. It was our first real joke, and I realized we were building something beyond titles and party lines. On field trips we understood each other without words. When a room grew tense, I knew he would step in to ease the tone. He had learned to weave small clarifications into my points, turning arguments into dialogue. I, in turn, slipped him figures that strengthened his arguments with opponents. A team was forming between us. But behind that teamwork was a truth we didn't dare voice. Every time we ended up side by side without witnesses, warmth spread through me, unasked for but undeniable. And when I caught his eyes, I saw the same reflected back. One evening we both stayed late in the committee office. I was drafting analytics, he was revising notes. Silence settled, comfortable but tense. Do you always work this late? He asked without looking up. And do you always think that excuses your schedule? I shot back, and we both laughed. The laughter broke the wall. For the first time, I saw him not as a polished air, but as a man tired, searching, vulnerable. We ended up talking, not about politics, but about favorite books, movies, even childhood stories. He confessed to sneaking out of class for basketball. I admitted to nights spent reading environmental reports instead of watching shows. Different worlds, yet here they intersected. When we finally packed up, he offered to drive me home. I refused, afraid of gossip. But inside I knew, in another world, I would have said yes without hesitation. Our story became something between a game and a confession. We pretended to be only colleagues, yet every detail betra. During one session, he slipped me a note, don't forget to breathe. I nearly laughed out loud. It was absurd, but perfectly timed, because I had been holding myself too rigidly. I scribbled back, don't forget not to interrupt. He read it, lifted his eyes, and his smile said more than words could. That was our secret code, hidden in plain sight. We were inventing a private language. And in that language, every small exchange carried meaning. I began to realize that my days were incomplete without him. He had become part of the rhythm of my life, not as a political opponent, but as someone whose presence made the air feel lighter. It was dangerous. But the danger only deepened the sweetness. Jealousy ambushed me when I least expected it. At a reception, I saw a striking journalist approach him. She laughed too loudly, touched his arm too freely. He answered politely, but my chest tightened. I slipped out to the balcony to breathe. Cool air brushed my face, but heat boiled inside me. I hated myself for caring so much. A few minutes later, Tom joined me. He leaned on the railing, pretending to study the skyline. "Better air balance out here," he said casually. I didn't answer. He glanced at me, his expression serious. "You really think I was listening to her?" he asked quietly. Still, I stayed silent. But my silence told the truth. He had seen my jealousy. And in his question, I saw his honesty. That night I wrote in my notebook, "Trust is the antidote to shadows." He had given me reason to trust. What surprised me most was how naturally he slipped into my life. I expected conflict, but instead he brought ease. When I buried myself in numbers, he would joke and make me smile. When I got lost in technicalities, he reminded me, people matter more than formulas. One chilly evening, we left the building together. Without a word, he slipped off his jacket and draped it over my shoulders. I wanted to refuse, but couldn't. The warmth of his jacket felt like more than fabric. We walked under the street lamps, our shadows falling side by side. I caught myself thinking, this is what danger looks like, not loud, but quietly becoming necessary. I knew we were risking everything. Yet in that moment, risk felt like the only honest choice. When work consumed me completely, I thought he would step back. But the opposite happened. Tom began appearing in the places I least expected. In the committee library, he quietly slid the exact volume of statistics I needed toward me. In the elevator, he leaned close enough to whisper, "Don't forget to breathe." I laughed like a schoolgirl. They were little things, but together they built a bridge between us. One day I was defending a project before skeptical lawyers. Their questions pelted down like hail, and I felt my arguments crumbling. Then Tom stood up. Calmly, without drama, he clarified figures and repeated my points in his own words. The room fell silent. He had just saved me, not for himself, but for me. Afterward, we left together. I wanted to thank him, but words failed. He only looked at me and said, "We both want a fair game." It was not a declaration of love. Yet it struck me deeper than one. For the first time, I felt we were on the same side, no matter what the world thought. That evening we both stayed late at the office. I worked on a report, he reviewed notes. Silence filled the room, not heavy, but intimate. Then he lifted his head. "Are you always this serious?" I replied without thinking. "Only when someone distracts me." He laughed, warm and unguarded, and the sound wrapped around me like a blanket. We began to talk. Not about politics, about books, childhood memories, even our fears. He admitted he was afraid of becoming nothing more than the oil heir. I confessed I often felt small against the system. Those confessions were more intimate than any touch. We saw each other clearly, stripped of titles. And I realized, this was no longer simple attraction. This was the beginning of trust. At an embassy reception, he appeared at my side with 2 glasses. "You assume I drink champagne?" I teased. "No. But I thought you needed a break," he replied. We slipped away to a quiet corner. Suddenly the crowded room felt distant. His focus was so direct it scared me, not because I didn't want it, but because I did. We chatted lightly, but each word carried a secret undertone. When a reporter interrupted him, touching his arm and laughing too freely, jealousy flared in me again. I hated how visible it felt. Later, outside, he walked me to the car. I tried to refuse, but he insisted gently. "I don't want you walking alone." It was a small act of care, yet it toppled another barrier. I let him. And in the quiet of the night, I realized I wanted to let him. We began seeing each other more often. At first it was stolen conversations between meetings, then joint trips. But the most precious moments happened outside the agenda. One morning he brought me coffee exactly how I liked it, black, no sugar. You spying on me? I teased. Just paying attention, he answered. I laughed, but warmth spread inside me. That wasn't a colleague's gesture, it was a man's. I caught myself waiting for his notes, his looks, more than for official decisions. It frightened me. But it also made me happier than I dared admit. One evening as we left together, he draped his jacket over my shoulders again. I tried to give it back, but he stopped me. Keep it. It suits you, he said. I walked through the city wrapped in his jacket, wrapped in him. And for the first time I felt there were no barricades left between us. Our relationship became a silent conspiracy. We didn't allow ourselves open steps, but anyone watching could sense the charge. I knew it was risky, but I no longer cared. The truth crystallized during another hearing. Opponents fired questions at me, trying to break me down. Just as I faltered, Tom stood. Not loudly, not theatrically, simply and firmly, he repeated my arguments and added his weight to them. He didn't have to. But he did. In the corridor afterward, he caught my eye. You held strong, he said quietly. Only because I knew you were there, I replied. Silence followed, heavy, charged, undeniable. It was almost a confession. I felt the ground shifting under us. We were approaching the line, and once crossed, nothing would be the same. After that hearing, everything shifted. I could no longer hide the way I searched for him in every hallway. He, in turn, grew bolder in small ways. One afternoon, as we left a meeting together, he leaned toward me and whispered. I like how you hold your ground. The words were simple, but they sent a shock through me. They didn't sound like a colleague's compliment, they sounded like a man's confession. I smiled, trying to appear composed, but inside my heart beat like I had just won a war. We walked side by side. His hand brushed against mine, just for a second. It could have been accidental, but it wasn't. My body knew the difference. A wave of warmth swept through me, leaving my knees weak. We didn't stop walking, but I knew, neither of us wanted to pretend anymore. That evening we lingered in the library. I sat surrounded by papers, he bent over statistics. Silence hummed between us, thicker than any debate. Then he looked up. Sophie, are you always this unreachable? I smirked. Only when it saves me from pointless questions. He laughed, and the sound filled the quiet room like music. Then he stood, came closer, and leaned over the table. His voice softened. What if I don't want to ask questions? What if I just want to know you? I froze. My lips refused words, but my silence spoke for me. We stared at each other too long for colleagues, too intensely for rivals. In that charged gaze, something irreversible sparked. The following days were filled with a new electricity. We acted as if nothing had changed, but every brush of hands, every exchange of papers hummed with meaning. One night we worked late on a joint presentation. Sitting side by side, we leaned over the same document. Our shoulders touched. Then our faces hovered too close. I felt his breath against my skin. I raised my eyes, and his met mine. We didn't kiss. But the space between us dissolved, and I felt my heart surrender. That almost kiss was stronger than any embrace. I walked home trembling, knowing my heart no longer belonged solely to me. Jealousy struck again. During a briefing, a young lobbyist approached him, laughing too eagerly, slipping him her card. My chest tightened painfully. I knew it was business, but I couldn't watch. He noticed my expression. Later, when we crossed paths in the corridor, he stopped. Don't look at me like that, he said softly. She means nothing. It was the first time he spoke so plainly, cutting through all games. I didn't answer, but inside, relief bloomed. That night, I lay in bed replaying his words, whispering them like a vow, she means nothing. And for the first time, I dared to believe I might mean everything. We had reached the point where we could no longer pretend we were just colleagues. That evening he stopped me at the exit. "Can I walk you home?" he asked. I should have said no. But I didn't. We strolled under lamplight, talking about nothing, books, food, the weather. Then he suddenly halted, turned to face me, and looked into my eyes. "Sophie," he said, his voice low but steady. "I know this is complicated. But I can't keep pretending you're only work to me." The world tilted. His words were exactly what I had longed to hear, yet feared. I stepped closer, and he took my hands in his. His palms were warm, grounding. "Then neither can I whispered. That moment sealed it. Our barricades had fallen. What began as glances and jokes was now undeniable love. After that evening when Tom admitted I was more than work to him, I couldn't sleep. His words replayed endlessly, "I can't pretend you're only work." Each repetition bloomed inside me like spring itself. The next day we had a meeting with experts. I tried to act composed, but our eyes betrayed us. Every time I glanced up, his gaze was waiting. It felt like a secret language, invisible to everyone else in the crowded room. When the meeting ended, he leaned close. "Don't run off. I want to show you something." We walked together to the park. Washington was soft that day, the cherry blossoms already open, petals falling around us like blessings. Under one tree, he stopped. His eyes held mine. "Sophie, I know we come from different worlds. But this isn't an accident for me. I can't let it go." His voice was quiet but unshakably honest. My doubts melted. I reached for his hand. "Then we're both doomed," I whispered with a smile through tears. And for the first time, there was no him and me. There was us. After that walk in the park, everything changed. We could no longer pretend there was nothing between us. That evening at home, I stood before the mirror. I saw a woman no longer afraid. On my shoulders clung stray cherry petals, proof it had all been real. The next day, chaos filled the committee room. Advisors argued, lawyers waved papers. I sat trying to take notes when I felt a gentle touch on my elbow. Tom leaned close. "Don't worry," he whispered. "We'll manage." It sounded simple, but I knew he meant more than the report. He meant us. Later, when everyone had left, we remained. He took the folder from my hands and set it aside. "You carry too much," he said softly. "Let me take some of it." I wanted to protest, but he placed his hand over mine. His palm was steady, warm. For the first time, I let myself lean into that warmth. It wasn't a kiss, nor a grand speech. It was a vow, unspoken yet binding. Whatever storm came, we'd face it together. By then, our connection was impossible to hide. During another hearing, I sat across the table, but his presence wrapped around me like armor. When I faltered under a barrage of questions, he met my eyes and nodded slightly. "I'm here. Hold steady." That nod steadied me more than all my research. Afterward, in the crowded lobby, he found me. "You did brilliantly," Tom said. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." I wanted to thank him, but journalists swarmed. One leaned too close to him, laughing, touching his arm. Jealousy spiked sharp and raw. I retreated to shuffle papers. Moments later, Tom was beside me, his expression serious. "Sophie," he said quietly, "you know that's just work." I nodded, though my throat was tight. His reassurance wasn't just about her. It was about us, about choosing honesty over suspicion. That night, I finally allowed myself to think, maybe this wasn't fragile attraction. Maybe it was love. All day I felt the tension rising between us like a storm. We exchanged glances but no words. By evening, the building was nearly empty. I gathered my papers, hurrying to the door. His footsteps followed. "Sophie, wait," he called softly. I turned. The corridor was half-lit, windows spilling silver light from the street. He stepped closer, and the air thickened with everything unsaid. "I can't, not anymore," he murmured. His hand brushed my waist, hesitant but sure. I looked into his eyes. They held everything: fear, longing, tenderness. I moved closer, and that was enough. Our lips met. Tentative at first, then urgent, hungry, as if we had waited far too long. His hands drew me in, and I let myself fall. My carefully built discipline crumbled like sand. The kiss was long, searing, yet tender. The world disappeared, leaving only him, only us. When we finally pulled apart, my voice was barely a whisper. "Everything is different now." He smiled, breathless. "And I don't ever want it the same again." After that kiss, nothing looked the same. The corridors once filled with numbers and protocol now carried our secret. I went to work not just as an aide, but as a woman in love. Yes, we were careful. In front of others, he was composed, I was professional. But when we found ourselves alone, masks vanished. His hand would find mine, his eyes turned warm and unguarded. Those small moments meant more than any speech. One morning at the coffee maker, he handed me a cup exactly how I liked it, black, no sugar. "I already know what keeps you alive," he teased. "And you're not afraid of that?" I asked. "I'm only afraid of losing it," he said. I carried those words with me all day like a charm. When the cherry trees reached full bloom, we walked the park again. Petals rained over us, a symbol too perfect to ignore. I leaned against him and whispered, "I always dreamed of changing the future. But now my dreams have you in them too." He wrapped his arms around me. I knew storms lay ahead, politics, rumors, fights. But I also knew I wasn't alone. Washington's spring had become our spring. And no one could take it from us.